letting people in. So a little bit more about this training today. So this training helps to demystify public benefits, particularly those resourced by individuals and families with housing barriers. This training now is for those who are eligible to help them apply. It's also for those who are accessing the benefit and how to stay on or maintain and continue receiving this life-saving resource. This training is also for those who are eligible but have had difficulty with the lengthy process or have not been able to access the benefit. Some of the additional things that will be covered in today's training is just getting a little bit more in depth about some of the impacts some of the impacts to SSI, SSDI. We know we're expecting an uptick in applications that are connected to changing requirements from other benefits programs. There's possibly short-term impacts during the shutdown right now, and then, of course, like I mentioned, some longer-term impacts that are connected to changes in eligibility. And of course, as always, there's going to be an opportunity for advocacy and action at the end of our training. So let's get a quick check on time. Oh, we're doing pretty good. It's about 9:10. I think we've got almost everyone everyone in the room now. For those of you who have just joined us in the last couple minutes, we did do some introductions in the chat. So if you would please open up the chat, and actually for everyone, keep that chat open. We're going to be dropping lots of links and attachments as well that go along with this training. So for those who have just joined us, please introduce yourself in the chat. And I will go ahead and introduce our guest presenters. So we have Hillary Lovell and Kate Means, both from Benefits Law Center. Benefits Law Center provides legal advice and representation to low-income individuals with disabilities in matters related to Social Security disability and SSI benefits. BLC makes direct legal representation accessible at the convenience of the client and assists in the benefits application and appeals process in a way that accommodates their disability and other barriers that they may face. For most of us who have any familiarity with or experience with the process, we know that the application and appeals process can have major obstacles to moving forward and staying on track in what's already a very lengthy process. So we understand that advocacy and representation are really vital to navigating and accessing these benefits. So with that, I believe we have both Hillary and Kate online with us. Just want to make sure that I've given you both co-hosting capabilities, and you can go ahead and get started with sharing your screen and presentation. Like I mentioned, I'm going to be dropping a lot of links and attachments in the chat, so please keep your chat open. And also, if you have a question, you can certainly send me a direct message. Danielle is also on for a time, and I will do my best to try to catch it and and get you whatever information you need. Awesome. I see the presentation is now up. Welcome, Hillary and Kate.
Good morning. Thanks for having us. We appreciate everyone hopping on. It looks like we have a good amount of people here. Thank you so much for joining. Kate, are you on?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Good morning, everyone. I guess we're ready to get started here. So we are the Benefits Law Center. As Kevin mentioned, we do Social Security, disability benefits, also retirement and SSI benefits. So we're going to give you a little overview of what the difference is between those things, what the process of getting benefits looks like, and then some of the current issues going on with Social Security. The Benefits Law Center, we have been around for almost 30 years, founded in 1997. We help folks in King County, low-income folks who are dealing with Social Security issues, including trying to get on benefits, as well as resolving issues once people are already on benefits, like getting cut off or Social Security saying you have an overpayment and now you owe them money. We prioritize meeting clients where they are, making things accessible to our client base who has a variety of disabilities and other factors in their life that can make it hard for them to get service and maintain a relationship with us. And we do have exciting news. We have a new office space that we will be moving into next year that's downtown. So that that is exciting for us. And just like a little background on the Social Security Act, this was first signed by FDR in 1935, the social insurance program that originally was just to pay retired workers based on the work that they did. This was later expanded to become a program that will provide benefits for workers that have become disabled, and eventually SSI was also created, which is a program that provides disability benefits even without a work history. Unfortunately, Social Security can be pretty inaccessible to people. This is an organization that exists to serve seniors, people with severe disabilities that mean they can't work at all. And with a program like that, being so complex and taking so long to get to through the process of applying and getting benefits can really be a barrier to people. It's also a program that has historically been racially discriminatory. When it first started, it completely included agricultural and domestic workers. That has not now changed, but the impact and the accessibility is still a problem here. So there are a couple of different types of benefits that somebody can get. You can get benefits based on having a disability, which means that you have health conditions that are so severe that they wouldn't allow you to do any kind of full-time job. To get benefits based on disability, for SSI, the only requirements are that you're disabled and that you meet their income and resource limits, meaning that you're not making too much money and you don't have too much money or assets. Social Security disability insurance has the same disability requirements, but it has different financial requirements. You have to have worked enough hours or enough work credits at a job where you're paying taxes into the Social Security system to qualify for this benefit. And then disabled adult child benefits are for people who became too disabled to work before age 22, and their parent is also receiving Social Security benefits. Then they can continue to receive benefits under their parents' record. For people who are not disabled, generally it's about age. So for SSI, once again, this is not based on your work history. This is only based on, in this case, being at least 65 years or older and not having too much income or resources. Social Security retirement is for people who have worked and paid taxes into the system. You can retire as early as 62. You can retire as late as 70 for Social Security, but for most people that are getting Social Security retirement right now, their full retirement age is 67. If you take it early, you get less benefits per month, and if you take it late, you get more benefits per month. There are also benefits based on a family member's earnings. So if, for example, if a spouse passes away or something like that, there are survivor's benefits. So these are benefits on another person's record. Here is just another little graphic to try to represent the overlap and what these programs each do. So again, we've got the retirement, and we've got SSI, SSDI here. And so SSDI is disability, but also based on work credits, whereas retirement is based on work credits, but as well as age. And then SSI can be either disability or age, but it has those financial requirements where you can't be making too much money and you can't have too much money in your bank account or in resources. And then about the amount of your benefit is also going to be linked to which type of benefit you're receiving. If you're getting retirement or SSDI, it's going to be based on your work history. The more you earned and the more taxes you paid, the higher payment you get. And if you become disabled before retirement age, you would get the same amount as you would for a full retirement benefit at the time you become disabled there. For SSI, that amount is the same fixed amount for everybody. That changes every year. They raise it for cost of living. Although so occasionally, sometimes people's benefits are reduced for other reasons. But in general, if you're on SSI, everybody's getting the same amount per month there. And then if you're receiving two different types of benefits, if you're receiving one type of benefit based on a work history, if that benefit is really low, you can also still receive SSI. They would just reduce your SSI based on what you're getting in the other type of benefit. And in terms of who qualifies for SSI, so this is the type of benefit that you get not based on your work history. In general, you need to be 65 or older, blind, or meet Social Security's definition of disabled. In terms of resources, you can't have more than $2,000 in resources, and that includes money you have as well as the value of stuff like property. If you own more than one property or more than one vehicle, the value of those things will be counted as part of your resources. And if it's a married couple, that limit is at $3,000. You also can't be making too much money. That's a number that changes every year as well. For this year, you can't be making more than $1,620 per month. And this covers income whether you're doing work for it or not. So if somebody's giving you money or helping you, giving you money, or you're getting some kind of if you're getting like investment returns or things like that, that would also be counted as part of your income. In terms of citizenship, you need to be a citizen or a documented qualified alien, and then meet special criteria, or be exempt. If you are somebody who is an immigrant or not, or even if you're not, something to keep in mind that a lot of times people don't know is that if you leave the country for more than 30 days, your benefit should technically stop, and you're supposed to alert Social Security about that.
And moving into more detail on some of the non-citizen rules. Like Kate mentioned, there's the citizen, if you're a citizen that's applying, then you meet that requirement. But for non-citizens, your status matters to Social Security, and they look at the specific status that USCIS, the Immigration Services, has awarded to the claimant. So, common one is LPR, lawful permanent resident, or someone that has a green card. The way Social Security views this is, and this is based on federal regulations. This connects to the INA, the Immigration and Nationality Act. And so the federal rules and regulations that Social Security uses is tied to the immigration policies. So I tend to think of it as like two different buckets. First, we have to look at what the immigration status is, and the person needs to have a valid card, immigration status card that has not expired to show Social Security. So once they say that they have that qualified status, then they also look at conditions. And so this might be some of these are additional burdens on the non-citizen who's applying. So one common example is someone who's the lawful permanent resident. They are required to have 40 work credits to be eligible for SSI. And if you remember what Kate just explained, is that SSI does not require work credits. There's no work requirement for citizens, but for a non-citizen, there's this extra requirement. There are some exemptions. So folks that are veterans or active duty, or a spouse of one, or a child of an active duty, there's some exemptions there. Also, there's some exemptions, or kind of they're grandfathered in based on the date of their receiving the status. And that is based off of a big reforms that happened in 1996. TANF was reformed at that time. There was a lot of regulatory changes then. So, and there's also some time limit conditions. And these are all pretty detailed rules, but we just want to put it out there because we know we're all serving clients who may not be citizens, but have statuses that would allow them to apply. But they're just keep in mind, there's going to be potentially some extra rules. And the best advice I can give is make sure that they can get their status card, have their status card available when they're applying. And Social Security should be able to tell them whether, based on their status card, they're eligible to apply or not. One exemption I just want to highlight, because I've come into contact with this a few times in the last couple of years, is that for folks who are non-citizen but are members of a First Nation band in Canada, there is an exemption, and they're exempt from all the non-citizen SSI rules based off of a treaty. So there's a lot to go over there. And now we want to answer some of your questions. This is the first part. When the registration was sent out, you all answered some wonderful questions. So the first question we asked you is, what's some of the most consistent issues or struggles that your clients face when applying for benefits? Oh, okay. So, okay, so the first one, I think this is a conglomeration. A lot of you had similar issues, is that clients aren't able to follow through with the application process, or they can't get communication. So we have some tips here. My slides will come. There we go. So I think for case managers, having someone support a client maybe reading their letters or notices together. I know I've had clients that are really overwhelmed and don't even look at their notices until they're sitting with someone who might be able to help them. So if that's something that you do in your work, looking through with your clients, reminding them of deadlines or keeping track of the deadlines, if that's part of your work. I do that sometimes for clients that I'm directly representing. If I know there's an appointment that's been scheduled, I'm sending reminders ahead of time because I know my clients need that extra assistance, or we've already worked out our communication plan ahead of time. And oftentimes, I mean, I have clients that also have case managers, and it's super helpful when, I know that person might have interaction with them every single week. They have a set meeting, having somebody there to remind is really helpful. And also reminding them of maybe some updates that they need to notify Social Security if they've moved. And I think this is something that maybe some of the organizations I saw you all are working with, you may be helping people get into housing or access housing. And then if you know that person's on SSI or is applying, then if they're changing their address, that's something that maybe you can help your client do, is let's contact Social Security together and update your address with them, because unfortunately, Social Security does communicate primarily through mail. Another common question or issue, I guess, with applications we noticed were folks that, I guess, denials based off of insufficient medical evidence. And this can happen not only that maybe for whatever reason, the claimant didn't have access to medical care, there's a variety of valid reasons there might not be evidence there, but there are some tips for this. One is, maybe it also, we've seen cases where there's denials based off of this, and that's just simply because Social Security didn't have all of the medical treatment. They didn't request the records from all the places. Maybe the claimant, the person who's applying, maybe they didn't put all of their information down in the application because they couldn't remember. And I know that some of you may have access to Epic through some of the work that you do, or you can help them access with their main provider. Maybe might be able to print something from Epic, a list of all the providers they have seen. Maybe you can help them access MyChart or whatever other service that the hospital systems are using, or their primary care providers are using, just helping them gather that list, because I know sometimes case managers and other support and other advocates already know this because they're helping the client access those services. But another way to look at this is, maybe this is time to encourage your clients to seek those services out. Obviously, this is a choice that the person has to make, whether they want treatment or not. That's a different discussion. But if they do want treatment, it's not too late to get access once they apply, because it's such a long process. So maybe connecting them to the care, getting them the referrals they need, helping them get established. If they're starting to submit an application, well, it's probably going to take them months to even review the actual medical data. So it would be a good time to, establish that. And even at the beginning stages when they're thinking about applying, then that might be the time to have those discussions again about, well, you did want treatment and you didn't follow through this. Would you like to do a referral this time? Another common question, my clients are afraid of proving immigration status. So we're coming back to immigration status from the slide we talked about before. So to clarify, and this is an issue that I have experienced directly, and we don't have access to this person anymore, but before the change in hierarchy, we could meet with the regional communications director. And I took this issue directly to her based off of a client that I was working with. And what I was told was that Social Security has a, quote, verification system. That means that they can communicate with USCIS, the immigration services. However, in order to do that, what they have is a verification system. They have to get a valid status card. They will input that data, and somehow they will get verification that the status is correct or current, or this person's identity, whatever they're verifying. Because, we'll go over the application process briefly in a moment, but when you apply, there's an application stage when you submit your application with the field office. For SSI in particular, for example, once you get to the stage, let's say you've gone through the process and you get approved, well, now maybe it's been a year or more. And so now they're approving you, they have to put you in pay. They also verify that through that entire process, nothing's changed on your eligibility. You still are under your income and resource rules that Kate mentioned. And because they're not a citizen, then they're going to check their immigration status to see if that has changed or not. So then before they even get put in pay, they have to verify at that time too. I will say we have gotten, some concern from clients about fear of going into the office. And honestly, I think the fear is warranted. I haven't heard of it that directly, but I have heard of ICE agents outside of other federal facilities. And the hearing office is in the same. There's the federal building downtown. I mean, I totally understand that concern. The other thing we know is that Social Security's confidential. I mean, all of these records are super confidential. Social Security numbers, data, all of that. We know that was removed by DOJ, and there's ongoing litigation about that, in fact, about the legality or illegality of that. And so we know that data has been removed and we don't know what they're going to do with it. So that's all to say, I wish I had a better answer other than I think that fear is warranted. And, if someone is afraid of going into that office as the advocate, who am I to say I can guarantee it's going to be not an issue? Because honestly, I can't guarantee that right now. So that's not the advice I want to give, but I think that's the advice we have to give right now. And so getting the application through the first time, and then I saw some comments about, having to reapply multiple times, getting told to reapply or getting denied, and, just feeling like you're kind of ping-ponging back and forth. What we want to highlight here is actually, I think you shouldn't reapply, you should appeal. Not in all cases, but in general, I think the agency has a tendency to tell people to reapply when they actually could be appealing. There is an appeal deadline. Almost every Social Security decision, not every, but most decisions can be appealed. And if it is a, decision on disability or not, on whether you meet this program or not, that's generally a 60-day deadline. You have an additional 5 days for mailing. If you miss that deadline, you can appeal late. So there's all of the links in this slide. These are clickable links. You're going to be getting these slides. And you can also just Google SSA 795. That is a statement of claimant. You can use it for anything, but this is where I would have a statement from the claimant of, they call it good cause for late filing, good reasons why I appealed late. Like, I didn't get the notice, I was unhoused and I didn't get the notice. I've been in the hospital, I didn't understand and I needed assistance. There's a lot of reasons that our clients, especially clients, I mean, they're all clients with disabilities, if they're applying for SSI or SSDI, they have barriers to access this. So I would definitely encourage your clients, if they've applied, instead of getting in that cycle of reapplying. And the reason why it's most important is because when they appeal, they're preserving their filing date. So if and when they get approved, they can get back pay going all the way back to the first date they applied, which if they've appealed, I've had clients that it's been years of back pay that they're owed. And for SSI, that's an average of $10,000 a year. That adds up if it's 3-4 years of pay that they are owed. Okay, so I just want to briefly go through the disability. What is disability in Social Security's mind? This is how Social Security is going to evaluate whether someone meets their definition of disability. They have a very specific way of looking at it. I would not evaluate it the same way. It might be different than other agencies evaluate it, and it's probably different than the claimant themselves would define disability. But in order to get the benefits for SSI or SSDI, you have to prove you are disabled under their rules. This is sometimes called the sequential evaluation process or the 5-step process. And they go through an order. This is a simplified version of it, but the first thing they're going to look at is whether the person is earning too much money. They set this dollar amount every year. This year, it's $1,620 a month gross earnings. If you earn above that dollar amount, then you're not disabled under their rules because you're earning too much. It's not, necessarily a livable wage, and it's the same number across the nation, regardless of cost of living in different cities or locations, but that is what it is. They also look at the severity of the impairment. Step 2, they're looking at whether there's a medically defined impairment that's going to last or is expected to last 12 months or more. That's usually a pretty easy hurdle to pass in this realm, or this, Social Security standpoint. At step 3, they're going to look at whether you meet one of their definitions of a condition, a medical listing. And Social Security has a listing for certain conditions organized by body system. So they have mental health impairment listings. They have, musculoskeletal listings. Some conditions aren't a listing, and maybe for example, one common one I can think of is diabetes. They look at how, if you look at that definition, it doesn't say, there's not really a way you can meet a definition under that listing, but maybe how other body systems are affected by that condition. But generally, it's a very specific way they're defining it. There's A, B, C, D, like listed criteria, and sometimes, severity levels. It's very specific, and we know not everybody meets, a specific listing because, the world is not black and white, it's gray. There's, and medical conditions run the variety. So most people, I would say, go to steps 4 and 5, and that is when Social Security is going to look at the claimants, considering all of their impairments together, their ability to work. They call that the residual functional capacity, your capacity to work with all of your impairments in mind. So that step 4, they're going to look at, could you do your past relevant work? And what's considered relevant is a specific term, but if they've worked enough in the past, could they still do that work? And then if they can't do that work, they're going to look at, could you do any other work in the national economy? Doesn't mean those jobs exist. Doesn't mean those jobs are hiring. Could you do any work? And we won't get into the details on that, but it's a very specific way to look at it. And here's just a visual process of that, how they're defining disability. So, if you're working substantial gainful activity, then you're denied. If your impairment's not severe enough, it's not going to last 12 months or more, then you're denied. If you meet a medical listing, you can be approved there and they don't need to go any further. If you don't, then they're going to look at steps 4 and 5. If you could do your past relevant work, you would be, and this is in their evaluation of your condition, then you would be denied. If you could not do your past relevant work, then they're going to look at, could your impairments allow you to work in any other jobs? And this is obtain a job and maintain it. And lastly, in this section, just want to talk summarily about the application. There's a lot more. I think this could be a whole other training in and of itself. So how to apply? I know there were a lot of questions on folks not understanding applications, their clients not knowing where to start. Quite honestly, the easiest thing you could do as a case manager is help them set an appointment. We gave you a how to contact Social Security handout, which Kevin will be putting in the chat. And this will be how to look up your field office. And that's based off of the person's address. It will tell you what phone numbers. There's also a link if your folks are outside of the King County area, where to look up the direct field office phone number, because it's kind of hidden on their website. But I put up, there's a chart that I have, a cheat sheet of like, what are the office phone numbers and fax numbers. Also, DDS has SSI facilitators. If your clients are applying for ABD, they're required to also, if they're on ABD, the age blind disabled state cash benefit, they're required to apply for SSI. So therefore, DSHS has established SSI facilitators within their offices. So those folks, I know there's a waiting list, but they can get on there. And online, if the person has a My Social Security account established, or they want to set one up and they have the technical ability, I would say they have to have their own email address they're comfortable with using. And if they have that, then they might be able to set up the My Social Security account. If they can do that, they can apply through that account. They can do the SSDI online, or the first time for an SSI application. I know for my folks, a lot of them have already tried to apply for SSI in the past, so that's not really an option. There's also a third-party application process. So if your client doesn't have My SSA, but they want to try an online application, agencies, like a third party could apply and say, I'm helping, this person wants to apply, and you can just answer the questions there. And then that would require that the person that's applying verifies they wanted to apply if a third party did it. So they would have to make sure they're checking their mail, they're answering their phone. That's a whole other training we could talk about. What does that online application look like? But just helping your clients gather the info for whatever, other appointment they have is going to be a really big support for them. This link, the Adult Disability Starter Kit, this is what Social Security puts out. There's a checklist and a worksheet to help them gather, like, who are their medical providers? What work have they done in the past? Just kind of trying to gather all their information in one place so that when they have that appointment, it's really fruitful and they get it submitted. So here's a look at, I'm seeing, Kevin, did you?
Yes, I thought you were moving on to the next page. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I did raise my hand. I just wanted to say, Hillary is referencing some PDF attachments. I'm unable to get them into the chat, but just kind of reminding everyone, we will be sending out a recap and with that will be the slides and all of the PDF attachments that go along with these slides. And the attachments are clearly labeled, so you'll know which ones are which. So my apologies for that, Hillary. I can't get that in the chat, but the links are going in, and that's my last interruption for now.
Oh, no worries. No, that's great, because I'm going to be like, Kevin's dropping it in the chat. I'm going to stop saying that, but you will get all of this.
Still putting links in the chat.
Yeah.
Still putting
Yeah.
all the
Links are coming. And the handouts will be pretty clear. And the slides will be coming too. So all this information will get to you. This is just kind of a visual of like, what does the process look like if you're not familiar with it? The application is submitted with the field office, the Social Security field office. That's based off of their location where the person is residing. The office itself does an initial review for the basic eligibility things we talked about, like, are you under resource, your income low enough, your citizenship or non-citizenship eligibility. And they can deny it at that stage, and it would be a technical denial if you don't meet the program rules in general. But if you do, then DDS, Division of Disability Determination Services, that they're housed under DSHS, but they are Social Security department. Every state contracts with the federal government to do the evaluation process. In our state, it is DDS. They do the actual medical review. So all the information you're putting in your application on, like, what are my providers, what are my diagnoses and my treatment providers, they're requesting medical records from those places. So the providers you give them, the timeframes, that's what they're going to look at. So that's why it's important if you can facilitate your client getting more information in there, then great, because that's what's going to prove their claim if they can look at that medical evidence, and they're going to evaluate the disability. If there's a denial after that, it will go, you can file the appeal that I talked about. The initial appeal is the request for reconsideration. At that point, it goes back to DDS, but this is that next stage of appeal, and DDS is going to look at the disability again from the time frame of when you last informed them about your disabilities until present. So, months could have passed, maybe something new has happened, or you get more providers in there. And I will say I've definitely had cases where, the DDS denied because they didn't have all the information. They didn't request it from all the providers didn't respond, or the claimant was not able to keep engaging with the process either. And then if it gets denied on that first appeal, the request for reconsideration, you can appeal again and request a hearing. This is an administrative hearing in front of a Social Security administrative law judge. If they're denied here, there's more appeals after this. This can go on to the appeals council within Social Security and to the federal district court if it's denied there. So there's a lot of appeals here. And this is all to say that, there's a lot of steps in this process. I would say from application to initial decision, it's probably taking at least 1 year. From recon to a second decision, I think is shorter, maybe 6 to 9 months. And if you're requesting a hearing, it's at least 2 years from your application, I would say, maybe 3. It kind of depends on the situation and like how quickly, how much they reviewed at the beginning stages. And I've also had hearings where we've had many appeals and it's been many, many years because it's bounced back and forth between the councils. So that's just some very basics on application to give us a framework.
All right. So I mentioned some of these, the resource rules earlier. I'm going to go a little bit more into that. This is for SSI benefits. So as a reminder, those are the benefits that you would get just on the basis of being disabled or 65 or older, and not based on your work record. So the way that the government views SSI benefits is pretty harsh. They do not want to give SSI benefits to anybody that they think has access to any money from anywhere else that they could use to support themselves. This makes it very hard for people on these types of benefits to, get any plan to move out of poverty. But these are what the rules are, unfortunately. So if you are on SSI, as we mentioned before, you can't make over, I believe it was $16.20 a month. You also can't have more than $2,000 in resources, and that number has not changed since I believe like the 70s, which is ridiculous. And in terms of resources, that includes money that you have in bank accounts, in cash. It also includes things like vehicles and real property. So if you have one home or one property that you own and you live in, that won't be counted. If you have one vehicle that you own and you drive, that won't be counted as part of your resources. But if you have any other property or any other vehicles, or if you have property that you don't live in or use, the value of those things would be counted as part of that $2,000. That is the maximum that people on SSI can have. There are a couple of ways around this in order to help people, build some wealth, have some money that they can use for other things. One is an ABLE account that you can set up for up to $100,000. That only applies to people who have become disabled under Social Security's rules before the age of 26. There's also a program called the Plan to Achieve Self-Support, which you can use to set some money away. Burial funds up to $1,500 are allowed and not counted as part of resources. Although I have a case recently where my client had his cremation fund set up, had it set up for a long time, and was getting his benefits cut off, and we discovered Social Security was counting that burial fund twice as part of his resources, and therefore that put him over the resource limit. So for people on SSI, it's really important that they are aware of, what money they have, what property they have, and report changes to Social Security. There can also be issues if they get like a large, I have a client that only pays cash for things. And if you get a big back pay or something, and then spend it all in cash, Social Security might be like, where did that money go? Are you hiding it under your bed? So having a record of how money that people received is spent can be important for SSI. And in addition to those rules about what you can own, what resources you can have, there is, of course, income rules. You can't be working over the SGA level for that year. Substantial gainful activity is what Social Security considers a wage that is now you're actually working. If you do work or get money from somewhere else, the first $20 that you get from any source is excluded as income. The first $65 that you get as income that you earn is going to also be excluded. So that can be $85 of income a month that's excluded. If you work a job and earn money, they only count $1 for every $2 that you earn. So some people on SSI may find it beneficial for them to work a bit of a part-time job. Their benefit is going to get reduced because they're working, but only at that 2-to-1 rate. Unearned income is anything that you get that you didn't work for. If you're getting money from a friend, if you're any kind of money that did not come from a job that you're getting in is considered unearned income, and that is reduces your SSI benefit dollar by dollar. Another thing that can happen is if you are living with somebody, like you're crashing with a family member or a friend, somebody else is covering your housing. Social Security views that as now we don't have to pay you as much money because this is to cover your living expenses and somebody else is covering these living expenses for you. So if you're living somewhere else or somebody's paying for your food, Social Security will reduce your benefit by a third, plus $20. Ways to get around that are either creating some kind of like lease document, a business agreement, showing that you are paying rent. It's also possible to show that this kind of support is a loan. If there's a document saying I'm going to pay this back to you on this schedule. The loans are not considered income. The difficulty with that can be you have to show that you actually have a plan to pay that back, which can, for people at SSI, not always be realistic. And we are going to go back to some of the questions that people have had, and about what's the most consistent issue or struggle with maintaining benefits. So one thing that is, sorry, one difficulty with maintaining benefits is that people have changes in their life, where they live, where they work, what their financial situation is, and they don't always report those to Social Security. If you move and you don't tell Social Security your address, they're just going to keep sending letters to your old address. They're not going to know. You're not going to get updates. If you start working or your financial or living situation changes, they're not going to know that either. And so that could result in Social Security paying you for a while, and then they realize, oh, we shouldn't have been paying you anymore because of this change. And then you get what's called an overpayment, where they say that you have to pay them back and they can cut off your benefits. Also, as I was just talking about with resources, making sure that clients know what they're allowed to own, what things they're allowed to have in order to stay eligible. Another common issue is the overwhelm and the mental and emotional strain of following all of these program rules, understanding exactly what you're supposed to do, and just in general interacting with Social Security. The Social Security offices, more than ever, are extremely understaffed. The staff don't have the support and resources to do their job right now. And so interactions with Social Security and people applying for Social Security can be tense and, fraught with a lot of stress and fear on both sides. And so, working with clients to help de-escalate, and just to help explain that this is how the system works. And it is going, it is going to be difficult. They're going to be digging a lot into things. You need to be on top of things so that they can't even try to say that you're breaking a rule. And that is a lot to deal with. Helping people know exactly where they need to call, when they need help, what things they need to send in, having a checklist of this is what I need to do can help a little bit with that overwhelm from such a complex, bureaucratic system that we're dealing with. Another thing to be aware of is just that if you go into the field office and you're causing a scene, you're making problems for the employees, they can ban you from that office. And that will make dealing with everything a lot more difficult. So we try to avoid that. Another issue is just making sure that you get all the paperwork in on time. There are a lot of forms to fill out. They can be long. They will require people to, remember things about their past, all of the jobs that they've worked, where they've gotten medical care. And Social Security also is not the best about sending out these things that they say they're going to send out. And so consistently, checking in, is there anything that I need to send in? Responding to every letter that you get promptly, filling out those forms. Hillary mentioned earlier, you can do good cause for late filing. So if you are late, don't assume that that means that everything is lost. You can still try to send those things in with a letter saying, this is why we were late. Either, we didn't get the notice, we were looking for assistance or representation from an organization that could help us with this process. Maybe I was in the hospital or in jail and I couldn't respond. You can always try to do good cause if you get something in late. And then also if you've missed a deadline, you can try to reopen an old claim. Um, and there are different rules about reopening claims. I think it's 2 years for SSI that you can reopen a claim, and 4 years for SSDI. But reopening a claim will preserve your original application date, meaning you can get more back pay rather than reapplying. And this is probably one of my biggest struggles with Social Security, getting through to a person, getting an answer from the Social Security office. We have a handout which includes all of the local field office numbers and the Disability Determination Service number. If you search online for phone numbers for the field office, they'll give you a little tool where you can enter in your zip code and it says it's going to give you the local field office number. It doesn't. It just gives you the same number for everyone. So we've sent out a handout that actually has the real local field office numbers there. And calling that directly is going to be more effective than calling the national line, which is the number that they give out. And the only other tip I have other than that is just persistence. When you're calling Social Security, a lot of it is going to be, I waited on hold for 20 minutes and now I'm hung up on and I got to call back. And that's just what it is like working with Social Security. And that leads to a lot of frustration and a lot of people giving up. And that's kind of what they want. So don't do it. Another thing that can be difficult for people is understanding. Do you have a question, Kevin?
Oh, yes. Just before you move on to that next slide, I just wanted to just reiterate again, we'll be sending those handouts out. In fact, the last one that was just referenced is pretty clearly labeled. It's just how to contact the administration. I also just wanted to bring to your attention some comments or questions that were in the chat. Maybe if you take a look and can find a different time to bring some of them up, but just different people talking about various barriers and obstacles that they have faced with their clients, everything from language barriers and also having, I think there was a comment very recently about just questions about how eligibility and income is impacted by housing vouchers and things like that.
Yeah, if any questions that I'm not having time to get to right now, I will look at in a minute, and either me and Hillary will try to respond to those.
Thank you, Kate. Okay, go ahead. Last
All right.
interruption for me.
No worries, thank you. So another thing that can be difficult for people is understanding what all of these notices mean that they get from Social Security. And Social Security can send out a lot of notices. There are some that, are just automatic. They don't mean anything. They are just telling you information about your benefits. And then there are notices that tell you there's a problem or we're changing something. And unless you really read them, they all kind of look the same. One thing that can be helpful, especially for clients who are on both types of benefits, on SSI and SSDI or retirement, is knowing which program the letter is coming from. If it's an SSI letter, it will say Supplemental Security Income at the top. And if it's an SSDI or retirement letter, it will say Retirement Survivor Disability Insurance on top. And knowing what program you're working with knows what rules you're dealing with that program and what you need to do to fix the problem. There are also notices from DDDS, the Disability Determination Services. These ones are going to have much shorter deadlines than most regular SSA notices. Most regular SSA notices, you respond within 60 days. For these DDDS notices, you're going to have a 10-day deadline. And so this is often a case when you end up doing a good cause for late filing, because they will have one date on the letter, you didn't get it until 5 days later, and then you have, only a couple of days to respond. So if that happens, that is a good cause. You should still try to respond as soon as possible. DDDS has questionnaires. They have things like function reports. They want to know about your health. And they will also send letters about medical appointments that you need to attend. Sometimes Social Security will want to do an exam with one of their contracted doctors to get more health information to determine your case. So one thing about DDS with the 10-day deadline, you can often actually get a hold of them by phone, and there will be a phone number at the bottom of the letter. They will put the name of the examiner and their actual phone number, and it's usually a lot easier to get a hold of DDDS than it is of Social Security.
Okay. And before we move to the next slide, I will also say DDS has also changed recently, and I didn't address it in the slides. Their phone systems have changed. They also have they are updating their phone systems, and they're not giving they are kind of giving direct phone numbers now, but they're not printing them. And sometimes they're not giving, they're kind of just communicating with the DDS adjudicator. But I've found that when you call DDS directly and their phone number's on the handout, I should have it memorized because I call it enough. But it you can reach a person pretty quickly there. So if you know that someone's application is already at the DDS stage, you can help them communicate with DDS pretty easily. So that's one facet of this where you can reach a person. So now I think there are a lot of questions in the chat. I hope this next section, this is our last section before we're going to have a lot of time for questions. So we're going to save it at the end, and I'm going to stop sharing at the end, and maybe that'll give me some time, Kevin, if you want me to drop our handouts in the chat while we're starting those questions. If that's helpful, I can do that too. And so I think we're gonna have a lot of time for questions at the end. So now this last section, we're really gonna talk about what the heck is going on with this agency right now. How can you as advocates and supporters of your clients or applicants yourself, how can you deal with them? And we're gonna have a full section on some changes and benefit verification letters specifically. But first, here's some like major updates of what's going on. You probably already know that the office has moved to an appointment-based model. This was before this recent administration change. It started at the end of last year, but they, the frustrating part is it's becoming less accessible. But I think the idea is good. I think we need to get to a functionality there. Their idea is we need to make sure that what's happening in the office is fruitful, and we're working through these cases. So their solution, whether it's good or not, is, well, you're going to schedule your appointment so that we can get people in to meet the right people and get the thing accomplished. I don't know if that's fully happening, but there's two different dockets they're scheduling. There's people who want to apply. They've always scheduled those appointments. Those have been scheduled appointments. That is a separate scheduling system. Every other issue is on a different scheduling docket. And my understanding is those are shorter appointments, and they're going to resolve that issue there. And for example, you have to go into, if you schedule an appointment to drop off forms so you can get a receipt copy, that should be a short appointment. If you schedule an appointment because you have to show your verification cards so that you can get a new Social Security number or get a new Social Security card, or you need to do an appeal and the client wants to schedule an appointment for that, the claimant wants to schedule an appointment for that. All that can happen. You can call the field office directly to schedule that, which you will have the numbers. You can call the 1-800 number. We've been told that all of that. Now they have exceptions to requirement for an appointment, and they call those dire need exceptions. What is dire need? Good question. generally, if someone's on SSI and they're not getting their money because it's a needs-based program, their issues might be considered dire exception. It used to be in normal times, needing a benefit verification letter would be a dire need exception, and someone could walk in and wait for that. However, what is happening with the government shutdown? As someone asked in the chat, great question. We're all figuring it out. Social Security workers are considered essential frontline workers, and they are still required to go to work, and we know they are not getting paid. So, like you mentioned before, the tensions are high. I imagine that people are going to be calling out sick because they can't afford to pay for childcare when they're not getting paid, or, they're having to do other jobs. Like I talked to somebody who used to work at the administration and is now a claimants advocate. And during past furloughs and situations, that's what she said happened is people had to call out because they simply couldn't afford to come to work and not get paid. So fewer workers probably. However, there are a lot of their services are still continued. There's some services are continued, some are discontinued. They are still doing processing applications, appeals, payments are still ongoing. Social Security number, your Social Security cards, you can get new cards. All of those things are still happening. Offices are still open on what they call limited basis, but all the appointments that are being scheduled should still happen. Granted, people might be calling out and we don't know what that's going to look like. So expect more delays. However, there are some particular discontinued services. Some of these I didn't put in there, like they're not doing FOIA responses right now, but for what I think us as advocates, we need to know is that benefit verification letters are not happening in office. The next slide, we're going to talk about how to get those. Overpayments are not being processed. What are they stopping processing? I don't know. I mean, if you've had an overpayment and then you've already submitted your appeal and it's just sitting there and they're not because you've submitted your appeal, it's not withdrawing, they're just not going to work it up. So that's just going to sit for even longer, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if they're not taking money out of your check. If they are taking money out of your check, then you care more about that. And then the 3288 forms, that's where you can do the third party like request for information. That's another way I know folks have tried to get benefit verification letters in the past. Those aren't being, from my understanding, third-party inquiries are not being, is not one of their continued services. So this is all to keep in mind. Yes, a lot of things are not happening, but I would say the bulk of their work is supposed to keep going on. Phones have changed and their phone systems they've needed a fixed, but they're moving to it's like an AI phone answering agent. So you say what you need and then they're gonna connect you to whatever. And then also the phones are ringing. You might call that direct field office phone number, but we can't guarantee which office is actually answering it. My understanding is that the phone systems are all connected so that an agent in an office across this, and I think it's statewide, I don't think it's countrywide right now. I think it's within Washington, is that we might get an agent in a different field office in Washington, but we've been told they should be able to do everything that the agent in your field office should do. They should be able to schedule appointments. They should be able to see the file and tell you what's going on. So it might be a good thing because you can actually get to a person. And we'll say that in the past, the field office direct phone numbers, 1-800 number, you can wait on hold forever. And I know they say their numbers are going down and how long it takes. And I'm telling you, that's not, those numbers are not, must be including everybody that hangs up because I have not gotten a short wait on the 1-800 number. The local field office numbers used to hang up, at least recently, they would hang up after 15 minutes of being on hold. That's not happening. They will keep you on hold longer, but a person will answer. And I think that's actually an improvement. Instead of having to call back like 4 or 5 times, maybe it'll tell you your wait is 60 minutes or 70 minutes. It might tell you your wait is 40 minutes. And yes, that sucks, but at least somebody's answering. And we're told that person kind of knows, or can answer something. If you don't know what you need, if you say agent, it's supposed to route you to a phone rep, at least for now. There are some new rules and a new form I want to talk about. Again, this is a handout that I will try to drop in the chat once I stop sharing, is that if you have clients that have Alaska Native Settlement Trust income, if you're familiar with this at all, just know that that's one of $2,000 of that has in the past has been exempted, and every dollar beyond that would reduce SSI dollar for dollar as unearned income. And there was that $2,000 exception, and that caused a lot of problems with Social Security estimating income. And at the end of the year, all of a sudden money is being taken out and people being confused. And they just changed because of a law change that happened in July. They now have all of that income is exempt. However, when they wrote that legislation, it was specifically for 5 years. And so in 2030, it will expire unless they extend it, which why does Congress do that? But that's where it is. There's a handout that has more information on that. If it's a client facing handout, if you have anybody in that situation. Another new rule, it's not super new, so you may already be aware of this, but when people get overpayments, if they don't appeal, there's an automatic recovery rate. SSI has 10%, so 10% is going to come out of an SSI paycheck if there's an overpayment that hasn't been appealed until that overpayment has been repaid. For disability insurance, the default rate used to be 100%. So if you didn't deal with it, they're taking every dollar out of disability insurance. They changed that. So then they finally changed it to 10% to be equal with SSI, which was great. And then this administration came in and was like, no, we're not doing that. And finally, they've landed on 50%. So if you don't know, if you have a client that's on disability insurance, they have no idea what's going on. And now they say, I'm only getting 50% of my check. I don't know what's going on. You can probably guess it's a overpayment that's being repaid. If that's default rate has already happened, they can still do the things. They can appeal. Remember, we can do appeal late with good cause. They can request a waiver. They can also request a change in repayment rate to negotiate to a lower payment rate. So all the appeal options for overpayment, still might be there. And then lastly, this is probably a small section of people, but there's a new form. If you had someone that's on a continuing disability review and they do appeal and they want to keep their payments during that appeal, that's when Social Security says, we evaluated, you've been on disability, we're doing our periodic check to see if you're still disabled, and we find you're not disabled anymore. If they want to keep their benefits while they appeal that decision, they have to file this form, and that's a new process. So that was a very quick general updates, but let's get into what you all want to know about, which is, how do I get a benefit verification letter? I think this is probably the time of year when housing needs this. People are renewing their subsidized housing vouchers or things like that. So under normal operations, you could walk into the field office or call the field office. Remember, I said dire need exception. You could call the 1-800 number, and through their automated system, you could ask for the proof of income. You could file that third-party inquiry where the claimant would sign it and say, I want you to release this to, General Housing Authority, Social Security, a Seattle Housing Authority at this person, and release my benefit verification letter to them. And then if anybody that has a My Social Security account can download it online. However, as we know, a lot of my clients aren't able to access online, but that's normal operations during the government shutdown. As far as I can tell, based off of what their discontinued services are, we know the field office is out because that's not a service their field office is doing right now, unless things change. And I understand the third-party inquiries are not happening. So as far as I can tell, the only two ways you might be able to help your clients get benefit verification letters is through My Social Security account and the 1-800 number. And a tip on that is to make sure that the beneficiary's address is updated with Social Security. So you might need to do that ahead of time. And I think you can do that with the field office and then call the automated number. So it's a little convoluted. One other little idea, and I did not put this in the slides, but I talked with a contact I have at DSHS, who's a tribal outreach specialist, and we coordinate on some of the outreach I do, and he does outreach at the same locations. And if possible, the DSHS has systems that they interact with Social Security to verify for their own benefit requirements. They have to verify Social Security income, and they have a system. So I would encourage, if maybe there's a workaround. If you can't get your client this verification letter through any of these, could you work with DSHS to get proof from that and then negotiate with whatever housing authority you're working with or housing agency? And I know they have funding requirements, but maybe in the interim, if the federal agencies are not operating in a way that allows us to get these like emergent needs met, could our state systems fill a gap there? And I'm wondering, I know DSHS has systems, getting somebody there that would evaluate like what are the things that we actually have done. Maybe that's something you could explore if you're really hit a like guardrail on that. So that's my suggestion for benefit verification letters. And another update, I don't know how many of your folks are on paper checks, but the agency has decided we are moving to electronic payments only. And there are some small exceptions, and it's not really clear who those are, who might be able to keep paper checks. They've really phased it out almost completely. So I think that I've heard there's 450,000 people across the nation that are on paper checks still. out of, however many millions, and this is including retirement, like the Social Security, I think there's 70 million people on Social Security if you include retirement in that. But still 50,000 people having to change is a lot of people needing to make decisions. And they're also not doing paper checks on the temporary when you need an emergent payment, I believe. They did insert these mailers when they were sending the update, we're going to do this. So what are the options then? And you may be familiar with these direct express versus direct deposit, is that honestly, direct deposit, if you can get your client set up with a bank account, if you can help them establish that, and they're willing to do that, I think that's the preferred method. For all my clients, I say, if you can get a bank account, like get a credit union account, get a free checking account, do that, because Direct Express is a third-party payment center. And they are notoriously hard to deal with. It's hard to reach them. They're not in our time zone. And also, if you're someone has their sound on, can you mute? Thank you. So if you have a client that needs to change from a paper check, I would encourage them to do direct deposit. And the problem with Direct Express also is that, they're going to be charged. There are charges. Now, I imagine banks are probably going to charge if you keep losing your debit card, they're going to charge perhaps. I know that Direct Express will give one free card if you lose it. And then after that, they charge you. And if you need it expedited, there's another charge on that. If the funds are stolen from Direct Express, you're dealing with getting the funds back from Direct Express. And I know like banks, all of it should be federally insured. It operates like a bank account. However, being able to walk into a bank or deal with your local banker if you have a fraud issue, I've never had an issue with a bank not returning funds if your debit card was stolen, or you can prove that there was fraud there. But I have clients that just prefer Direct Express, and that's all they'll do, and like whatever works. But how to change it, if they're on a paper check right now, honestly, the best thing you can do is help them set an appointment. That's probably what most people are going to have to do, which also sucks knowing that we have limited access to the offices. However, if they have a My Social Security account and are on disability insurance only, I understand they can request that change through their My Social Security account. However, I think they need to be kind of technically savvy to do that, because there's going to be an access code they get. And so there's like some extra processes to do. And I have checked with our Washington public affairs specialist to get his take on from the agency's perspective, what can we tell people to do? And he was saying probably the best thing is to go into the field office, because the online system is there's a lot of probably moving parts to that. There also, all the information that the agency's putting out and all their blog posts and things, they're linking to this Treasury Department Go Direct service. And I've just personally never interacted with them. And that wasn't the advice that I got, because I'm unsure how that transition is going to work. Through the Treasury Department, there's 4 different agencies where you can make this payment change to, like the VA, and Social Security also has this change availability there through a form or the phone. So you could try that. I just personally have never guided a client through that, so I can't really tell how that's going to work. Another little caveat here is that there is a waiver. If you want to try to keep the paper check through the Treasury Department, is a waiver form. And if you go to that link there, I think you can kind of click through and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. On the waiver form, one of the exceptions is like something to the effect of, I have a mental impairment and I can't manage a bank account. My concern there is, if the person says, I want to do this, I want to keep a paper check and I want to do that, then that's to the Treasury Department. But then how they communicate that to Social Security will concern me, because Social Security, if they think someone can't manage a bank account, they're going to tell them they need a representative payee. And that's a whole other issue. So if your client doesn't want a rep payee, I would be a little worried about I can't manage a bank account to the Treasury Department. Could that create a flag so that Social Security would then say that person needs a rep payee? I would be concerned about that, frankly. And last slide before we get to questions, so I want to leave a lot of time for questions, is, okay, so we've given you a lot of info, and maybe you want what can benefits loss center do for my clients? So there's a lot of things we're trying to do, but please keep in mind we are small but mighty. We have a very small team, and the volume of Social Security cases is huge. I mean, in King County, I think it's something like 12,000 applications. I don't know, Kate, maybe you remember the numbers better than I do. There's tons of, and there's way more people than that are already on benefits that probably have some issues. So we just want to manage expectations. You know, we want to try to help people as best we can, but our ability to take full representation on cases is very limited. But my suggestion would be, reach out to us, and maybe there's what we can do is, advice and counsel. We can do a lot more of that where we're helping guide you and your client through the issue, especially because if you are reaching out to us as a case manager or other advocate, you yourself are savvy and you are able to do things with your clients that they might not be able to do on their own. And so that advocacy is so appreciated and so vital to our community members that we're all serving. So maybe what we can do, and maybe it's get advice directly to the client, maybe it's with support for you, or give advice to you specifically on what you need to do. So we can do things like through that process, like helping review notices, to giving advice on what your next steps are, and answering specific questions about that, helping complete forms. Like, I just need to complete this form and submit it. We might not be able to represent you, and if you can help that person stay connected to their mail and review things, like maybe we can just get you through over the hurdle of completing the form, giving you what advice on what steps you need to get, what information you need to gather. That's a lot of things that we could do. We could do that in person or remote. And there are some cases that we do, and we do all take cases. All of the attorneys have cases on our caseload that we take full representation on. Also just bearing in mind that, okay, we're a small team. I would love to close my cases, but Social Security takes forever to do things. Even when I get somebody on benefits, or get an approval, I got to make sure their payments start. I got to make sure they start getting their back pay. Like, there's a lot of things that it just takes like months after we think we've resolved something for us to be able to close a case. So, and I don't, so that's where we're limited there, but we're trying to expand what we do in other ways to try to serve our community members as best we can, and reach more people. And one of the ways we're trying to do that is through clinics. What I mean by clinics is, like, we're having ongoing services to try to resolve specific issues without us, like, you have an attorney assigned for the life of this case. It's, we're going to resolve this issue right now, rather than have you sit on a wait list for us to, we're going to resolve this issue, and then you deal with that, and then you can come back to us later if something happens. So we have an applications clinic, which has been ongoing. Alex Strout in our office, and he's a MSW, and our paralegal, and he has social work students that he works with. He started it last year, and we're doing it again this year, where the social work students, we have them for the full year, and their sole project is to help people apply for benefits. So there will be clients that will come in, and they will work with them on getting all the information, submitting it, and then once it's submitted and they know the application's been verified, then it's done, right? And then the other clinic that we're really excited about, this is starting next year. Peter Greiser and Travis Luna are also gonna be participating in the overpayment. Honestly, everybody, Kate, you're gonna be doing the clinic. Lexi, who's in the
I'm
chat,
ready.
you're gonna be doing the clinic. Everybody's gonna be doing this clinic probably at some point. But our goal is, we know a lot of people have overpayments because, like all the program rules Kate was talking about earlier, people get tripped up on that. They get over-resourced, or, things happen. Like, I saw someone in the chat was saying there was winnings from gambling, and that probably, that's unearned income that you got. And if you didn't report that, or maybe you didn't spend it down, that might have been an overpayment. So there's forms that are pretty easy to fill out, but people get really intimidated by them. And also, private attorneys aren't doing overpayments anywhere because there's no fees associated with it. So our idea is, let's have an overpayment clinic, a recurring date that we help community members fill out these forms. So the first one, we're going to partner with Seattle Public Library, the one downtown. We're going to start doing these quarterly, but maybe we'll do them more frequently. We're recruiting volunteers, case managers. If you want to volunteer and you want to get trained on how to do this, and great, we'd love to have you. If you're interested in that, my email is at the end of this. You can certainly send me an email if you're interested in volunteering with these, It'll probably be on a Friday because that's when we get most of our law students availability. So we'll have students and we're going to be doing trainings on this. But then, the idea is someone can come into our clinic, complete the forms they need, and we'll submit them same day so that the appeal is done, or they've changed their requested repayment, they've requested a waiver, they've requested a reconsideration, or whatever the things are that needed to be done. The goal is we can try to get it done that day. And we're really excited about it. We don't have a date yet, but that'll be fully announced and we'll send it out, and we'll ask Kevin to spam your everybody like when we know it's happening. So if you have clients you need to refer and it's around that time frame, great. And then lastly, referrals. We have some intake forms we'll share. If you do have clients that you specifically want to refer to us, give us a really description of what's going on. And the best referrals, you've done a little homework. If you don't like, oh, my client doesn't know what's going on with their benefits. Guess what? I'm not going to know either because I also don't have access to any of their stuff yet, so help them get a copy of a notice, help them contact Social Security and ask what the issue is. Why did my payment stop? Help them get a copy of the notice that they're entitled, because they're entitled to copies of all their notices. Try to do a little bit of homework first when you refer, because that means that maybe I can answer that question right now. If I see that notice, I might be able to tell you exactly what's going on if I can look at that notice. If I don't have the notice, I'm not going to be able to give that person any advice either. My advice is going to be contact Social Security and ask for this notice. I might be able to guess a few things, but it's probably not going to be the most fruitful. So that was a ton of info, and thank you for sticking with us. And now we're going to get to the question portion. And before I stop sharing, you'll get all the slides. Just know our contact information is here. And if you have a referral, please send it to the info@benefitslawcenter.org. If a referral comes directly to me, I might just do it there because we're trying to manage caseloads and everything. So referrals go to info@benefitslawcenter. Our new address, please remember, we're moving it closer to a lot of services. We're going to be in Pioneer Square, area, which is going to be great. And then after that, I think we're ready for your questions. Kevin, did you want to Oh, and there's some bonuses that you'll get as a surprise on your slides. Kevin, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I know people have lots of questions, so I want to let people get their questions in, and please go ahead and raise your hand if you do have questions. I just wanted to point out a couple things. Going back a few slides, you had talked about the transition from paper checks. It's very clear that being able to do it through a bank would be preferable for so many reasons, but just want to acknowledge a lot of us are working with people who are unhoused, underbanked, or maybe their safety plan requires them to seek alternate banking for a time until they can get reestablished. Just know that um, that card, that other option that functions like an EBT card, is still an option for you. It can be viable for however many months you need until you can transition on. So just kind of wanting to point out, yes, one is clearly better than the other, but if you are working with someone who, again, is underbanked, has a safety plan that has them not interacting with their regular banking account, then that is absolutely an option. Also, just wanting to acknowledge that there's limited resources for this sort of support outside of King County, and we had a couple questions about Snohomish and Whatcom, and I can attest from direct. I think many of you can as well, but when you're supporting somebody or a client outside of King County, yeah, you really do kind of start that process of having them contact attorneys just one by one sometimes and see if there's people taking cases, as was described by Kate in the chat. And so I think I have some other thoughts, but I can't remember them now, and I will come back on later. So with that, thank you. Hillary has just put in the How to Contact Social Security Administration PDF. That's the one that's got all the phone numbers. So please go ahead and download that one right now. That one comes up. That one's come up a few times. Actually, I think Hillary looks like you're in the process of uploading those PDFs right now. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started with questions. I'm looking through the audience here. If you have a question, please just go ahead and raise your hand. We sent out the questionnaire for a lot of folks who had registered a little while ago, and so we did cover some of those their most common sort of obstacles. But we know that when we do a long training like this, there's other questions that get brought up, so or come up for people. So please go ahead and raise your hand or come off mute or use the chat. I see there's a question in the chat right now. I should specify, you don't need to come off camera. You don't necessarily need to ask your question aloud. Yeah. So I see Kate is answering one question in the chat. I see another one. I don't know if it's been addressed yet from Catherine. Maximum amount that an attorney can take if they're helping someone get Social Security. Hillary or Kate, do you have an answer for that one?
For applications, if attorney, authorized representative has, filed the paperwork and they filed a fee agreement, the maximum is 25. It's contingency basis, 25% up to this. There's a statutory limitation, which I believe, Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they've increased it to like 9,200. It's whatever is lesser. So usually that's 25%.
Yeah, it's
And
9,200.
yeah, and that's only of back pay. So contingency of an award of back pay. So if someone was approved for benefits, SSI or disability insurance, from the earliest date that Social Security could pay them until their benefits actually started, it does not count towards ongoing monthly benefits. If there was no back pay, there's no attorney's fees. And that's also why, attorneys don't take overpayment cases in private practice usually, is because there's no fees associated with that.
It's already off mute. Thank you, Hillary. Let's see if there's some more questions in the chat. Do you take cases outside of Seattle, King County? I know, Hillary, you already mentioned your current wait list or your current caseload is around 12,000 in the county, but it is good to just clarify.
So our funding in general, the terms of our funding says that we are supposed to serve folks in King County. I know I have taken a couple of cases in the past where the person is outside, perhaps maybe I started the case when they lived in the county and then they moved away, and you can get an exception to do that case. But unfortunately, for the most part, our funding restricts us to supporting people in King County.
And then a follow-up question is if you know of any firms who can support outside of the jurisdiction. And Kate, you might, or Hillary might have a specific answer for that, but I'll just reiterate and this is just from my personal experience and as described in the chat, when you're working outside of this county, it's really any firm that does this type of work could potentially take it. But of course, there's that back pay piece involved, and then it's really up to their sort of capacity. Kate or Hillary, if you have more to add on to that follow-up question about firms who can support outside of your jurisdiction.
Yeah, so we have lists of private attorneys. We have a list for people who are located in King County and for people located in Pierce County. But as you said, they can take cases from throughout the state if they decide to do that. And so maybe, Hillary, we can send over our attorney referral list. I'm not sure. I think we're allowed to send those out. Yeah, our King County and Pierce County attorney referral lists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also I will say outside of King County, NJP, Northwest Justice Project, does a little bit, right, Kate? I don't know so they do some Social Security advocacy outside of King County.
A little bit. They do a little bit of it. I don't know how much. Yeah, how much of those cases they actually take, but they have the resources to do it if they choose to take those cases.
Yeah.
My awareness of it was that they don't necessarily take those cases, but of course I don't have the most up-to-date information for NJP, but they, of course, as many of you know, offer a lot of tools online to help fill out forms, and they might have, certainly resources to help with the application process, or even just other resources to get connected to or reach out to.
And I got some direct questions, so I just want to read these off and then we can answer. The first question is, would rental assistance from an agency affect SSI benefits? So like subsidized housing would not affect SSI. They do not count that as income the same way as, like Kate was mentioning, the in-kind support and maintenance. Like if you get Seattle Housing Authority, DESC, Chief Seattle Club, like all of the subsidized housing that an agency is paying for, you need to report that, you know, you have subsidized housing, but that does not reduce your SSI. And the other direct question I got was, is there a place where applicants could get support with any of the applications for benefits? You know, like I said, we have the applications clinic, so we're trying to expand helping people apply where they have those barriers. And if you can't access that, or, you know, the wait's too long, and they're moving pretty good. You know, like I said, DSHS has SSI facilitators. So if you have, and their job is to get people who are on ABD or even applying for ABD to get their applications into Social Security, because it's a program requirement of the state cash ABD program. So that might be another way. That's why we started the applications clinic, because we were realizing those cases were sitting on our wait list too long, and we wanted people to get started without knowing, like, we don't have an advocate to sit with you along the case. But, you know, we might be, if you get denied, come back. Or if you get a notice and you don't know what it is, come back, you know. But just some people just need to get over that hurdle of getting it in. So I agree, there is a gap there, and like the need for the clinic. And yes, it's not the application clinic is just an ongoing contact us. Go to that info box, the info@benefitslawcenter.org, that email rather. Send a referral there. I gave you the intake sheets here. So you can fill out the intake sheet for your client if you're referring somebody specifically. Send it to info@benefitslawcenter.org. Someone from the applications clinic will review and just like reach out and to schedule. So that's done individually for sure. And yeah, see, I'm reaching out to volunteer. There's Angie, if you're volunteering for the overpayments clinic, you could email me, or just in general too, you can always email info@Benefits Law Center, because that's our main, you know, contact line, and that gets routed to like the various folks that are supporting our different services. So for sure, you could go there. I did see a question about how can people be on multiple different types of Social Security. That's going back to the slide. If you look at the slides when we send them out, the Venn diagram of payments. So if someone has retirement or disability insurance, and their benefit rate is lower than the maximum SSI rate, they can also apply for SSI. So if they're 65 or older, they can get on SSI if they're under resources based on their age, so they don't have to be disabled. So there's a scenario where someone's retired and they're not disabled, but they're just retired. They're over 65, for example, and their retirement benefit is less than 2026 $967. Their benefit amount's $500. Well, they can also get some SSI to get, not stack them, but to get the difference. And the same thing happens with disability insurance. And that also reminds me, I'm going to put a link to the cost of living adjustments. They happen at the end of every year. So in 2026, the payments are going up slightly for SSI. I think we only got 2.8% cost of living adjustment. That changes all their other numbers too, like the substantial gainful activity number we mentioned. That's going to go up a little bit, so people can, you know, earn a little more without it counting against them. You know, all the dollar limits are going to go up. So I'll put that in the chat shortly.
I was trying to share my screen so that way I could show that Venn diagram, but
yeah, I can and I can share
that's okay. I think
too.
you'd have to get it open and then also find the right slide.
Yeah.
These are great questions. We still have a few more minutes if people have other questions.
Yeah.
Again, I'll just reiterate that we are sending the slides out as well as all the links and attachments. And then also on our end for the coalition, we're going to be writing up a recap in a blog post. So that way, if you feel like, oh, there's some really specific information, it's likely going to be up there. We're pretty thorough with our recaps. But please feel free to reach out anytime, of course, to BLC and through their channels, but also feel free to reach out to me if there's something about this training or some either content or an attachment that you would like me to send to you. I'm going to put my email in the chat right now.
I also saw a question, and I know Kate's been doing an amazing job of keeping up with the chat, about, Social Security hanging up on people. I will say their phone systems have been changed. So I'm hoping that less of that's going to happen. I mean, the 1-800 number, I think, has been, notorious. If you're calling the direct field offices, it, they used to hang up on you after a certain wait time because they were just like, well, nobody's available, so call back again later. And that was also frustrating because you might get that multiple times in a row. Um, and I've found now they're not, the local numbers aren't hanging up on me recently. They're letting me stay on hold longer. That does mean I have a longer hold time, but people are answering. But I've also had situations where it's like, I've gotten hung up before after waiting a long time, and it's really frustrating. I think part of it's a technology problem. At front of, like Kate was mentioning, their official position is that, they are prioritizing. The prior Social Security commissioner before this administration took over, one of Martin O'Malley, you've seen him, you may have seen him in the news. He's been like commenting on a lot of what's going on with Social Security, but one of his top 3 priorities was increasing improving customer service. And because I mean, they've rightly identified their customer service was not good, and it hasn't been good. So I don't think we're going to have any wonderful improvements based off of just changing what's going on in the agency. But I think because they're changing things technology wise on the back end, I'm hoping at least that'll improve some things just in terms of like being able to have somebody answer without the phone hanging up. Having these field offices that are fielding calls so we won't have to hopefully wait as long in the future. I'm hoping maybe that technology will improve that. I don't know though.
We have a question in the chat about having, for the question, it's about a monthly consult group about these topics. For Genevieve, that it's actually been, you're not the first person to inquire about that. And I think for Hillary and Kate and I, it's not necessarily something we've talked about in our previous planning for this, but we are, of course, getting the sense that this sort of support for advocacy for you all is very necessary. So we will certainly be in touch after this and think about ways that we could possibly make that happen. I just want to address that now, knowing that we may not have anything for you right away, but just that that's something that we'll certainly look into. There's another question from Tyler right after that. Oh, it looks like that's been addressed by Kate. Just kind of piggybacking onto the last thing that Hillary brought up and bringing us back to the conversation about the phone calls. I think for all of you in this room who have supported anybody at any phase of this process, that is a very familiar experience. And it's just really the persistence. I know that word was used, and that's so huge. It's really challenging. You've got a number of clients that you're working with, but it does appear that hoping that maybe you give up and wait till later is part of punting it or keeping it, keeping the line short or whatever it might be. And just remind yourself, you're not waiting for nothing. This is actually part of the process. And if you can stick with it and support your clients and getting through to the other side, you will continue to move the needle. Okay, back to the chat here. Those are some thoughts that I had while the presentation was going on. Just, of course, remembering back to many a long phone call and the frustration that comes from feeling like that time was wasted. Kate, it looks like you've been addressing some of these. Looks like there's one more. It's part of that last conversation. We do have a few announcements, so I will just put a last call out there for any other questions. Again, you do have all of our contact information. We have a comment here at the end from Veronica about her deaf clients. Their deaf clients always getting confused about applying for disability because deaf is viewed on paper as disabled, but then eventually the letters get back saying that it's not a disability because it really means disability that prevents you from working. So Veronica had even mentioned it's just a comment, it's not a question, but I think we know that there's a lot of nuance. It's not black and white. Life isn't black and white, but we know these bureaucratic systems would really like it to be. And so, of course, I can tell you to continue to be persistent and dig for answers. But Hillary and Kate, if you have any comments specific to that, yeah, I'd love to hear from you too before we move on to our final segment here.
The definition of disability is something that's definitely confusing because it can mean many things in many different contexts. Like disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act is defined very differently than disability is with Social Security. And that is a point of confusion that we get a lot with clients. You talk to people, they are clearly disabled. They clearly have health issues that cause them problems with working, with other things in life. Social Security's definition of disability is very specific, and it really does mean somebody that can't do any type of work. And as Hillary addressed, even if that work isn't available, if you couldn't get hired for it, if you don't want to do that type of work, Social Security really, they are focused on can this person work? Can we get them to be a productive member of society? And so that if you're deaf, that is a disability. It may not necessarily qualify you for disability benefits under Social Security if they think that you would be able to hold any type of job.
Yeah, I agree everything that Kate said. I would also say that if you have disabilities and you are working, but you have additional expenses, we didn't really go into the details, but if you have additional expenses because you need to have services or accommodations that your work isn't providing in order for you to do that work, that can kind of help when they're calculating like what's SGA, like how much can you earn without it counting against you, in other words. And so maybe you have additional expenses. So I'm just thinking of some of my clients who are deaf who, utilize additional services. And if they're paying for that directly out of pocket, maybe that would help. And just to address the last question here, the list of disabilities, like go back to the slides and look at how they define disability. There's not a list, like there is a listings, and you can Google SSA adult listings, and I'll throw it in the chat while Kevin's doing his final comments, but that's not the only thing. You can remember, go back to the slides and look at the steps, because it's also, they look at a full, excuse me, your residual functional capacity. So it's individual to each person. So it's not just, there is a list, but it's not the only list. So I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. And then Kevin, I think you have some wrap up comment.
Yeah. Thank you, Hillary.
I dropped the link already, Hillary, by the way.
I think just the last comment on that is, instead of identifying what the disability is, I think their approach is the default is you can work, and you have to prove it to them why you're not able to retain and get employment. And so, someone may have a visual impairment or maybe deaf, but they might also have other types of impacts that compound with that disability, and that I know that's a big part of this application process. But thank you all so much, and Hillary, a special thank you to Hillary and Kate. This is a lot of very dense content, and you guys really did an amazing job of putting it in plain language, making it so we can understand, answering all of our questions as they pop up while also staying on track. So thank you all so much. And I know I'm a broken record here, but we will be sending out the blog recap of the content. We're recording this training, and so we will be sending that out as well. And then, of course, with that, we're going to have all the links and the PDF attachments. So in the final moments here, we do just want to transition to our closing. I had mentioned early on that the coalition is a coalition of homeless service providers and community members. We do trainings, but we're also known for our advocacy action. And so I'm going to put a link in the chat. I hope people have time to click on this link and take part in this advocacy action. It's like any sort of signing on. If you want to use your personal email instead of your work email, that makes sense. This one is specifically about the pending SNAP cuts. I know it's not Social Security, but it is in the realm of public benefits and also impacts a lot of the folks that we work with. So if folks want to take a look at that link, again, it's an advocacy action. We would love to get not only folks just signing on, but really the people in this room, the people that work directly with the communities impacted. Yeah. And then our last bits here. I know that's just a really quick advocacy corner. I'm trying to think about our time here. We have our links to our next meeting. So as many of you may know, we here at the coalition do a number. We do regular monthly meetings, membership meetings. We have guest presenters, and we really try to keep it focused on what's going to be helpful for all of you. Our next meeting is actually in person. We haven't had this in a very long time. Let me go ahead and find it here. Oh, of course, as I was moving things around on my screen, I lost my links here. But we have our next training, or excuse me, our next meeting is our in-person meeting. It's on Thursday the 30th, so just in a few days here. It's our combined meeting with the Coalition Ending Gender-Based Violence. It'll be at the Langston Hughes Performing Arts Center from 9 a.m. to 11. We don't really get started till 9:30. So if this is something that can fit with your calendar, or you've been attending our meetings in the past, we would absolutely love to see you there. And then after that, we really just have the only other meeting that we have coming up is our November meeting as well. Typically, we have a lot of trainings, training information to share, and we're promoting lots of trainings, but we're coming up to the end of the calendar year. So we don't have those registration links to share just yet, but please stay tuned. If you have been to any of our trainings before, you know that we really try to cover accessing benefits programs that are notoriously very difficult, just like SSI and SSDI. And so with that, I will again bring it back to Hillary and Kate from BLC. Thank you so much for being here. If you guys have any final comments, feel free to hop off mute. And thank you all, everyone who is still with us. This was a fantastic meeting. We got lots of questions answered, and please stay tuned. We'll be sending out those emails soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I loved seeing so many people here with great questions, and you all do such amazing work. And really glad that you're in our community and helping our community, because the need is high, but we got to keep going, right? So thank you all.
I see lots of thank yous in the chat. Thank you all. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, and we will